I send this message in part because my district president, whom I love and respect, encouraged public conversation on this. And I also send this message knowing full well that everything I'm about to say could be wrong or ill-informed. I hold everything loosely and I am open to correction. And it's not lost on me that I send this message while sitting in a hotel room in the middle of Finland where the Lutheran Church is facing crises that I hope never befall our church body in the US. In many ways, the LCMS is incredibly blessed. But nonetheless, we face some significant issues of our own, issues that are worthy of public conversation. And so toward that end, I have a message that I want to share with my fellow LCMS Lutherans. And the message is this: it is time to say the quiet part out loud. Our church body, its leadership, does not want more pastors. They want to preserve a particular model of pastoral ministry and to maintain their power over that very narrow model. They don't want more pastors. They want more pastors of a preferred type. And if they can't guarantee that, then they seem perfectly content for your church or mine going without a pastor altogether. Why else would they make it increasingly difficult for qualified men to pursue pastoral ministry in our synod at the very moment when we face a clergy shortage and when so many men are eager for formation and ordination? The latest example of this, of course, is the updated policy requirements for the specific ministry program, the SMP program, where our synod, through the work of the Pastoral Formation Committee, now mandates that SMP pastors be 40 years or older, and that priority for acceptance be given to those men seeking to serve congregations where there is otherwise no option for Word and Sacrament ministry to be offered. All this despite the fact that in 2007, when the resolution was passed that established the SMP program, yes, it was for those types of congregations, but also included in that was the option for SMP pastors to be staff pastors and church planters. But now our church body has severely narrowed the scope of who can take part in the SMP program. And in doing so, I think it's safe to say that they've implied that SMP pastors are somehow of a second class to MDiv pastors who took part in traditional residential training. And to say that all of this is deeply discouraging to our SMP pastors and our church leaders who are trying to grow the church and raise up pastoral leaders is a significant understatement. Sure, it's all being done in the name of safeguarding pastoral formation to ensure that proper training is occurring, but I'm sorry, I just don't think that's the case. You see, this comes on top of our leadership actively seeking to silence public conversation among its clergy about alternative education for prospective pastors. You're not allowed to talk about it. And report after report of pastors seeking colloquy having their acceptance delayed and denied, delayed and denied. All this while there is a pastor shortage. There is. I don't want to hear, well, if you don't count the churches that can't afford a full-time pastor, then it's not really that bad. There really isn't a shortage. Shouldn't we count every church? Doesn't every church where Word and Sacrament ministry needs to happen, don't they deserve a pastor? And if the answer to that is yes, and the answer should be yes, that every church deserves access to a pastor, then we should be adding paths to ordination, not restricting them. And I get it. We want to safeguard the teaching of the church. So do I. We want to protect against heterodoxy. So do I. We want to ensure a clear confession and unity in practice. So do I. But there are ways to do that apart from or on top of the university model. It's been happening for centuries. And for centuries, in fact, it was the standard. And if it could be an effective standard in the past, why can't it be a legitimate option today, especially given the incredible technology that exists? Tell me why. There is a circular logic at play among those who firmly resist localized pastoral formation. The argument goes like this. We can't do it because there isn't enough unity in worship and liturgical practice in our church body. Their fear is that forming pastors locally within our already fragmented landscape will only increase the fragmentation, especially in worship practice. And yet the solution that they offer is to double down on the one system that hasn't produced the uniformity that they're insisting on, traditional residential seminary formation. In other words, the very approach that failed to unify us is now being presented as the only way to prevent further disunity. Make it make sense. Look, I believe that we must have a means to identify, train, and ordain pastors in the local context for the sake of supporting current churches, planting new ones, and replanting dying ones. And if we don't, Synod Inc. will continue to shrink. It will die. I have been the supervising pastor for 3 SMP students and 1 colloquy. And I can tell you that in each case, the education and formation given to those men was excellent because of the combination of seminary training, student cohorts, and serving on the ground in real time. It might even be better. But if our leadership wants to make it more robust, make it more robust. If they want to add the languages, add the languages, but do it online and sure, through more required visits to Fort Wayne and St. Louis. Fine. And I get it. SMP is being used more and more broadly beyond what some think was its original intent. And do you know why? Because there is a dire and legitimate need for local seminary education. It should be possible to identify qualified men, young men even, train them, call them, ordain and deploy them all in the same local context. And I'll tell you what, it is not our confessions standing in the way of this, not at all. It's the synodical handbook, which I'm committed to abiding by. But still, it is worth noting that it's not our confession standing in the way. It's our polity. And polity can and must adapt to meet the standard of your confessional commitments and the reality of your cultural moment. It must. And if it doesn't, I'm left to assume some things about the motivations of our leadership. I'm left to assume that our leadership doesn't actually care about the needs on the ground or about the confessions we've all pledged our fidelity to. I'm left to assume that they care about preserving a preferred method of living out our confessions that they label as orthodox and protecting their power over it all. And I'm left to believe that they consider localized training and ordination a threat to their practice and their power, which I would say flies in the face of our confessions. See Article 10 of the Small Called Articles. I might get in trouble for saying all this, but let's be honest. The fact that there's even the hint of fear around saying stuff like this out loud tells you everything you need to know about our synod. We are ill. We need prayer. We must talk about this. I want to believe that my assumptions about the motivations of our leadership are wrong. And I hope to be proven wrong. But look, in an unhealthy family, silence driven by fear only keeps the unhealthy family unhealthy. It only keeps the sick system sick. At some point, people have to speak up and say, hey, this doesn't work for us. So let me ask you, pastor, layperson, is this working for you? For our church, for your church, this clamping down on control over pastoral formation, making the process for becoming a pastor smaller and harder, the death grip on control over the office of holy ministry over and against the local churches who contain that office. Is that working for us? If not, then we have to say so. And I myself am late to doing so publicly, and I'm grateful for guys like Tim and Zach and others who've been ringing this bell for a while. That said, to my fellow pastors who happen to have been trained via the SMP, I love you. You are my brother. And to those churches and church leaders who are desperate for a pastor and whose hearts sink at the idea of seeing the landscape for getting a pastor erode even more, I am so sorry. It shouldn't be like this. And to the church and district leaders looking to train and send local qualified men as pastors into their local context, I'm angry for you. It makes no biblical, confessional, missional sense. None. Our church leadership is doing our church body no favors when it comes to providing it with pastors. And I pray that changes. Head to convention and vote. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But I do know what won't work. Saying nothing. So let's continue to have the conversation. Let's say the things that need to be said. And Lord Jesus, save your church from herself.